Hello, friends. Welcome to Worldbuild with us, the podcast where we create fantastical worlds with help from you, our listeners. My name is Rob Hilferty, and I'm here with verified voluptuous Chris Prunty. And as always, our special guest here with us as well is Daniel Quinn. Daniel, good to see you again. How's the Star Wars hate going?
It's still strong with me.
As it should be. On today's episode, we are talking about the Empire of Embers. We're doing a deep dive in the Shield of the North and figuring out everything about their government, their power, culture, economy, and resources. We're going to start off with a quick recap for those of you who might not remember the Empire of Embers. It is originally a nation-state that worshipped the god of the Forge and had their god pact have the ability to resurrect people with a fairly strict limitation where you can only resurrect one person one additional time. So you basically have two lives to live as opposed to one. This empire had a fairly brutal start and a fairly savage start, essentially swathing and cutting through all sorts of people because, I mean, what better way to bring back your soldiers than have someone there to resurrect them? You're essentially, in some cases, nearly doubling your forces. And when you're early history, that can be a really huge deal, especially when you have the military focus like the Empire of Embers does. And in a more recent turn of events, what's happened is they've gone from a very warlike nation to one that was perhaps a little bit more pacified, still had a military focus. But what ended up happening is there were a group of usurpers who managed to overthrow the crown, overthrow the emperor, and exile them from the nation. The emperor, for the first time, had to play nice, learn politics, learn diplomacy, and then with a renewed sense of vigor and focus, came back and retook their capital. And what most people don't know is that this forced a divine coalescence between the usurper's god and the god of the Forge, where now when people are resurrected, it's not just that you're resurrected, you also are essentially a spy for those who resurrected you, because you can, whatever you see, the people who resurrected you can see as well. I feel like that's a pretty good summation of what we got going on. So, gentlemen, who wants to start off with some kind of government or power? Get us going.
So, as far as the government and everything, something had to have changed after the Emperor took back power. Like,
that's correct.
Something about him being more of a figurehead, or does he still 100% call the shots?
So that actually will transition to my idea pretty well. Yeah. But in my mind, I wanted it to be the emperor was supposed to be a figurehead in this new government that was going to be run by a shadow council. However, in a recent development of my own kind of thinking on the idea, I want him to be a little bit more authoritarian, and I wanted it to be... Actually, now I'm just going to transition into mine, so sorry.
No, that's fine. Didn't even want to.
But my idea was the emperor was supposed to abdicate power and was supposed to, in a display of... He was supposed to, show a united front. I mean, hell, he already offered his god as a divine coalescence, but realistically, that was just to gain the trust of the usurpers. So what ended up happening is, in this public display where they were going to join forces and show that they were in an alliance, he has the entire council of usurpers executed publically.
I love that. It's such a Palpatine move. It's so good.
It kind of is. But that's the whole idea is that, you had we've come to terms. And then the emperor kind of stands there and says, yes, we have. And then that's the signal where they're just... I
am the Senate.
Kind of, yeah. Stop comparing him to Palpatine. He's a more interesting character than Palpatine. Damn it.
And
is he really?
He becomes the Senate?
What?
Then he becomes Senate.
Yeah.
Well, he was already the Senate. That's the thing. It's not like he was never not the Senate. He was
we mean your emperor.
Yeah. Oh, I'm seeing this now. You son of a bitch. I'm just,
all right.
Okay, podcast canceled.
No! But
anyway, so my idea is it was a double cross. He was supposed to abdicate, but, what he learned in diplomacy, he also learned, hey, you know what? You don't have to do that. And that's my contribution, is that now there's a more authoritarian power in place, where once they were kind of losing their edge a little bit.
It's a true empire.
I mean, if anything, the attempted, overthrow galvanized his intent to just be like a hardcore bastard.
Well, and his supporters would view that as like a really courageous move on his part.
Right. I mean, we have a returned king. Like, we're reforging the empire. But now it's a little different.
And the coalescence is secret, correct?
Correct. That was never.
So it
part of
doesn't
the
even
public
look
plan.
like he's given up any power or showed weakness. It was just like, yeah, we all came together. And fuck you guys.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Chris, that was kind of my contribution to it. So what did you have in mind? Sorry.
So, moving on from there, after Order 66,
Yes.
I wanted it to be kind of like the Forbidden City kind of thing, only going on to the paranoia of what certain people who have dictatorships or take control, they're always constantly afraid that the next person to try and replace them is there. So I wanted it to build it. This most likely would be in the capital kind of thing, where it would be literally kind of like a forbidden section of the city where only his most loyal can live and where he lives. So it's a little bit of a point of interest and everything, but it shows kind of the separation of the emperor to everyone else. No one gets to get close to him. He works mainly through a series of
Mediaries.
yeah. If anything, maybe a public display that is kind of like giving a speech or anything. But even then, he's kind of probably high up on something, and there are more guards there than when he invades places.
That's actually really interesting because then it also feeds into the theme of like the divine coalescence. It's supposed to just change the god, but because you now have this built-in spy network of everyone that you've resurrected, it also builds upon the theme of paranoia that you might gain as well. So that's actually a really fun way to kind of build upon everything that we're already creating here.
Yeah, if he was communing with his god and his god was just like, they all hate you.
Right. I'm still not convinced that gods have a voice that they speak to people with. It's more of interpretation.
It could still just be a feeling. If that feeling gets empathically passed on to him. Like,
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, it's kind of like how people say, just my God spoke to me and I feel this. Where you're all traitors.
It's inevitable someone's going to say that,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. All right, Daniel, what was your contribution to government and power?
So before I explain it, I think it'd be helpful to remind people of how relics work.
Oh, that's important. Yeah.
To this particular.
Yeah. So relics are magical items that are essentially conquered gods that have been reforged into a magic item. And the Empire of Embers is the only place that can do this and can actually create magical items. And previously, when they were a little bit younger and a little bit more savage, they would just conquer gods and then make items of the broken god hearts. But now, in a more sophisticated era, it works a little bit differently. People frown on that a little bit more, and so there's been kind of a culture shift away from that. But what is go ahead, keep on.
Yeah, so I was really drawn to the rule of you can only be resurrected the one time. So what I love to do is introduce rule-breaking situations.
Of course.
At most, the rule of two.
Yeah, exactly. At least the rule of two, right? So what I'm thinking in this case is the Emperor and his paranoia, blending to what both of you guys are working on. In that special space, he has a special elite guard. And the way that he's created this elite guard is these are people who have died multiple times, and he's brought them back multiple times. But the way that he does it is that when these people are returned to him, their bodies are not fully complete, or maybe their souls are in some way damaged. And so the only way to keep them intact is by infusing them with pieces of relics that have essentially fragments of other gods. So this special elite force, not only can he see through them, but they serve him completely because they owe their continued existence to his reforging of their bodies.
That is horrifying and amazing. Also, name suggestion, The Returned.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
And, I mean, obviously, they're the King's Elite, the King's Guard, or whatever, but they're also The Returned, are kind of an interesting. Or, alternatively, the Reforged.
Yeah, it's even better. Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
I was going to go with the Immortal, even though they're
even
not.
good too, yeah.
That's
Maybe
already a thing in Persia. So,
Yeah, and I wanted it.
Yeah, okay. All right, great.
I like all three of those, though, honestly.
Well, I prefer either the Return or the Reforged, because I do want to try and stay away from direct cultural comparisons if I can help it.
But it's so cool.
Yeah, exactly. Of course it's cool. I mean, I would imagine that we would call the Emperor immortal, even though he's clearly not. I think it's more fun to do it that way as well.
Oh, even if it's just been a different emperor every time,
Yeah.
since no one sees him, it's just like, no, it's the same emperor.
The way I imagine
Well,
it,
now that we can do that, yeah. But I think that's more of a, maybe that's the new title that he's kind of given himself. And again, it shows his growing paranoia as well.
the way I imagine it working too is that they have to actually use the mechanisms of their forge to remake these people too.
Yeah, I was thinking that as well. Like normally God Pacted resurrect people, but this is like some kind of ritual where it's not just, so maybe you're combining a ritual with a God Pacted ability, so it's even more specific.
Exactly, yeah.
That's actually really, I think that's something that we've never done before, which I like even more now that I think about it. You know, where you can have rituals, but sometimes the rituals require a specific God Pacted ability or God Pacted person. And that actually, oh man, now we're getting into fusions and
It's like
stuff.
the edge
Because what
of
happens if you
technology.
have different types of God Pacted together? Oh man, that's super fun. Okay.
Yeah.
So as a quick little recap here, where we could have gone with like, hey, there's actually a shadow council. Hey, there's kind of a democracy. No, this emperor has now become twisted and paranoid and has a shadow force of like basically puppets that he's commanding. Also, that's pretty cool now that I think about it. You know, like imagine having a body cam, you know, back in like the 1500s, how much more like
And they're totally
terrifying that
loyal
would be.
to you because they actually believe in your power.
They believe in your power. And, oh, hold on. The Reforged are actually the usurpers that he publicly executed.
Yes, the revolutionaries that he spared. Yeah, I like that.
Because that's
Yeah.
the part of their personality that went away when he reforged them. Oh, man. Or maybe he brought
Maybe they
them
remember
back.
that because they can use that against the actual remaining revolutionaries.
And that's why he did it. That's why he reforged them.
Yeah.
So maybe he resurrected them once to be like, okay, you're back on my team now, and then they completely flipped their shit.
Yeah.
And then he's like, oh well, fuck it, I'm just gonna kill and torture you again, and like broke them
into it,
before killing them, and then brought them back again.
Yeah.
We've just created a supervillain here.
Yeah.
Oh man,
And I
this was
imagine-
supposed to be a pretty kind of good empire, and now
Whoa,
all of a
whoa,
sudden
whoa.
just went way
Ends
off.
justify the means.
I know.
Palpatine would have said it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Just do what Palpatine would say.
These are what has to
What
be
would
done to
Palpatine do?
stop the caliphate.
Yeah, what would Palpatine do?
Papa Palpatine.
Yeah.
Making all the rules happen. All right, let's move on before I lose my shit over this Palpatine stuff.
Do it.
So next we have culture. I wanted to kind of set the stage for what I thought would be a good idea for culture, because I know that I always say like, hey, we have a cultural touchstone for this. And originally it was kind of like an ancient Persia type thing, which is why Immortal makes sense. But at the same time, I'm kind of focused on the idea that it might be a more Roman style empire, at least in a cultural sense, because the Romans had such a deep respect for military and military power. I mean, in order for you to gain any kind of power in the system, you had to serve as a general first. Like that's basically how you got to be on the Senate. It's not like you could skip over that. It's just how it was. So in my mind, I want them to have every citizen has a deep respect for military service and the military in general, while also at the same time having this idea that, or this new idea that rather than focusing on the forge, on the actual creation of items and things and everything like that, there's a growing population of people, and this is like the other half of the culture that kind of supported the usurpers, which was, hey, we believe in reforging. So, you know, it's not just about creating an ironclad sword or gun or something like that. It's about recreating yourself and your culture and your country. So that's like the more progressive wing that is essentially being stamped out by this new paranoid dictator of an empire.
So
or emperor.
swords to plowshares.
More or less, yeah. But I also think that what they have on their side is technology. Because the one thing that I wanted to focus on with the military is what are the military people known for? And then Chris said when we were talking about this a while ago, give them guns. Because, you know, Forge, and they're all about the military. Why wouldn't they focus on weapons? Why wouldn't they be the first people to use guns? And I'm like, oh, that's perfect. because, like now you have a dichotomy between the military and the science people who are basically focused on, like progress, and it's a cultural and a technological schism as well. And it also shows, again, we're building on the themes that we were creating before with the usurpers versus the now authoritarian emperor.
What I like about that is typically when you think of a big imperial, like a big military-driven empire, you think they're destructive and they're conquerors and they're all about, weaponizing. But this is suggesting that they're interested in progressing through technology, which is really what military progress achieves. You end up having a rapid set of inventions and discoveries because you're trying to achieve, the militaristic goal.
You research things and go just like, we don't have a practical application for it now, but maybe, all right, yeah, I guess you guys can use it. We didn't find a way to make it blow up something or heal someone.
Crisis is the mother of all invention.
Exactly.
And more than that, you're making me think of the Mandalorian. You're making me think of the Werner Herzog guy who's like, every part of the galaxy that we touched got better. And I'm like, oh, that's perfect.
And that's the ultimate sell for the Empire.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. So now we can kind of push that as well, where it's a military force, but it's also a force for science and progress. And maybe Hondasa is kind of like, oh, like I imagine that like the Empire of Embers is kind of making kissy faces at Hondasa, and Hondasa's like sweating like, oh, but I got this caliphate.
We're making guns. This could be you, but you're playing.
Well, it sets up a good dichotomy. It's a good dichotomy between their enemies and themselves, because their enemies are interested in keeping the state of the world as it is so that they can continue their ruling, and then to imposing their philosophy of their state of being on other parts of the world. Whereas this empire, while they want to impose their will on others, they're interested in pushing things into the future.
That's a really great way of putting it.
Yeah.
That's really awesome. All right. Yeah. One other thing I wanted to add to the culture is, because it's so military focused, I was thinking about like, well, why would they have the best military? It's not just because they've been training and their whole culture is focused around that. It's also because you get to learn from your mistakes when you die. Like, you get one shot to come back, and guess what? You're like, I figured it out. And sometimes that's all you need. Like, when you have that much time and effort, it's like, okay, I know I died the first time, and I'm sure it's broken people to come back and be like, I can't serve in the military anymore. I already know what it's like to die from a sword.
An entire military force that doesn't truly fear death.
That's actually what I was afraid of, because I don't want them to be reckless, because it's the one shot that they have. But it's also like, because I don't want berserkers, right?
No, but you do have the Hail Mary of it, just like, all right, things look bad now, but if we win, everyone gets to come home.
Yeah. Oh, kind of like this is a literal Suicide Squad where it's like, all right, you're just going to rampart you're just going to like get torn to shreds over in that direction, but don't worry. We'll make sure that excuse me, sir, I've already died once.
we thank you for your service.
That's make sure he gets
That's
put
what
in
the
the
Emperor's
back.
like, don't be a coward,
Shot for cowardice.
Yeah.
I just wanted to go over that because I was thinking, like, how cool would it be to have like a military veteran who's died and he's like, I know what it's like. And,
literally.
It's like you get two shots at it. Like that's so rare. And like people were already good, like with one life. Now they get two. Like, come on, of course it's gonna be great.
They return. I'm assuming they return to the second life with all of their previous knowledge too.
It's a direct continuation.
Okay.
It's a direct continuation. Also, I should mention that this resurrection is not like, oh, you can resurrect people from 500 years ago if they didn't exceed their limit. It's like, I want to say within a day or two of the body dying, that's how long it takes for the soul to leave and then transition over to the next plane of existence. Yeah.
Just to go over, we've mentioned that it's resurrection, but I think it's a important thing to note. What about bringing back body parts? If you lose a hand, if you're decapitated, are there rules? Like, because I could see the army like being steamrolled at some point, and people are just like, all right, well, we got to chop up these bodies because we don't want them to like retake their position. And
I think that is a valid tactic on the enemy's end to prevent resurrection from happening.
Oh, I bet that's what they do. They dismember
They have to.
empire.
and that makes their enemy look so much more barbaric.
Actually, that would probably help with the PR department.
Yep.
It's like, oh, they're barbarians. They have to hack up the corpses of like. And meanwhile, the emperor is just like.
Well, it fits with the emperors. If the propaganda of the emperor is that, like, he wants to say that because he wants to cast the enemy as barbaric and backwards primarily.
Oh wow, that totally
backwards
fits.
primarily, yeah.
Totally fits. Absolutely. Yeah, that's my little aside for the culture, but because I think it's important to go over not just the cultural aspect, but what the impact of that ability would have as well on the culture itself. So sorry, you were saying
About the culture?
about the culture.
About the culture. So what I had for the culture was that I wanted them to be big on fighting pits, arenas, that kind of thing. Going back to the martial prowess of people, and also the fact that, well, not saying reckless, but it's kind of like having a really good medic on hand for something that should not be happening in the 15th century. And with reliquaries and other things that we've discussed earlier, like I think we mentioned about how sometimes the gods who are kind of trapped in this way don't totally want to serve, but there's still tools out there that can help people. But not just fighting pits or anything. One of the other things that I wanted to do is monster hunters.
Go on.
Since they're warriors and everything, and I feel like, how can we make these people appear good? Guns and other things, I'm picturing them being able to use these weapons, this science, these reliquaries, to go out and slay monsters or bring peace to the lands that they're taking over. Like, we mentioned that outside of the cities, it can get pretty wild, but who's out there to patrol? Who's out there to protect? Not necessarily the God Pacted, because Age of the Gun kind of levels the playing field for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I
hadn't come up with a name or anything, but like a guild of monster hunters. Legally distinct from Witcher.
The Pinkertons.
Damn it!
I like that because it lends to the whole civilizing, quote unquote, effect of the emperor's empire. That's the goal is to change the world for the better in his eyes.
Yeah. And say that they are people that he brought back. Even a better way to have agents that can go from town to town, roam around, all that. Because I'm assuming people who hunt monsters might die at some point.
I can see that also working. Like, it used to be like just a generally seen as good force that would be like reaching out to the empire, reaching the edges of the empire. That's because that's where you're going to see monster hunters, right?
Yeah.
Because of course, when you're in the cities, you don't have to worry
It's on a
about stuff
frontier,
like that.
yeah.
Of course, but
Frontier
then-
town and stuff, though.
right? And so now what I'm thinking is that originally this is how it was, where everyone was like, "Oh, monster hunters are good guys," but ever since the attempted usurpation, it's more like, "Oh, well, we've now there's been like a resurrected, like king's or empire's guard that's kind of been sent out among the monster hunters." So it's like, "Hey, I know everything's fine now, right, guys?" And then they're all like really nervous to be around that person. So it's like, "Oh, these are just now where they were once
Monster
just-
Inspector.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's actually not that bad. Yeah.
We're checking if you're hiding any monsters.
Well, that's always been a deficiency of any empire, is that its reach becomes problematic. So if there are guilds of these monster hunters and they're on the frontier, they end up serving as their own kind of like fiefdoms and kingdoms, and they end up being unable to be patrolled or policed by the emperor because they're so far away.
And that's actually a really interesting idea, because now I'm thinking of maybe the monster hunter guilds were the ones who mostly supported the usurpers. Maybe they were the ones who were like, hey,
They need the least support from the emperor.
yeah, exactly. And so they were like, we've been on our own. Like, yeah, we'll throw in with these guys because I feel like they have a better shot of understanding our needs. And so, of course, when everything goes, like backwards for them, what happens is, the emperor sends out his own spies in each individual, guild.
Oh, you'll have plenty of support. Don't worry. From now on, plenty of support.
Yeah, don't worry. The emperor supports you. We heard your pleas, and we now will help.
Yeah.
Don't worry. Like that kind of thing. I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and then again, it shows like the tightening grip of paranoia on the empire. That's really cool.
Well, and the complexity of just the concept of the monster hunter. Like, they're now revolutionaries can turn to them, and they're also a thorn in the emperor's side, but the emperor needs them because they're pushing the empire forward.
And they're protecting the emperor. I mean, or the empire in general.
So he can't retaliate against them directly. He's got to keep them in check without overcoming them.
Yeah, and I can see them being people's heroes essentially, like the people's champ, like Dwayne Johnson. who are basically there to protect the normal people because the Emperor, he has reach, but can't get every nook and cranny, like you were saying, like the reach can only go so far. That is such a fun bastardization of like what should be like the good guys, right? That's really awesome. Okay. Daniel, I believe that you have one for culture left, right?
Yes. So I was thinking of a moment in history that had a cultural significance because I don't totally understand what happened to the relics that were like prevalent in the Empire. So I'm thinking like when we mentioned there were being reliquaries. So I'm wondering if perhaps when this revolution happened, the Emperor came back. Part of his quote unquote terms were to collect all the relics that were like promulgating throughout the Empire and hand them over to a third party. And this third party, which I just gave the name the Retainers because they're retaining these relics, they originally were supposed to be totally in the service of the emperor because of his negotiations secretly with them. But now, because they do have this really valuable resource of reliquaries, they're kind of a fence and also like sort of on the side of the revolutionaries. It's sort of with the Empire. They're kind of this own third party within the empire that can negotiate more strongly against the Emperor than others could.
All right. I love that idea. And you also just sparked this idea that because obviously we're going to have lost relics, right? Where, maybe they lost a battle or maybe it just got stolen or what have you. So now in addition to monster hunters, we're going to be able to have treasure hunters or like people who are searching for these lost relics as well.
Yep.
And of course you can have the two flavors of it where it's like guy in a wide brimmed hat with like circle glasses, black leather, and it's like we are going to find the relic. Like what's his name from Indiana Jones?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that is where my brain jumps to. And then of course you have on the opposite end you got Indiana Jones himself looking for the relics, except now I'm just thinking, like the Ark of the Covenant is essentially just a relic. It's like I don't know what kind of god. It's a literal god heart, right? Like I don't know what kind of god that was,
Yahweh.
but I know who it was. I know who it was. I don't know what it was. But I like that. I think Chris, didn't you have an organization way back that kind of did something similar? Why don't you go over that for a bit?
Oh yeah, I had an organization in one of my games that was kind of just going around capturing gods and capturing kind of items that would not be good for mankind.
I was talking specifically, we created an organization in one of, I was talking specifically about, you made one that was basically I think it was like Warehouse 13 or something like that. Yeah. And I think it's embarrassing that you don't remember your own content, but luckily I'm here for you.
The content in this?
We literally made a podcast about it. Yes.
Was it today?
It was a while ago.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It was in the same episode where we did the Sithras and I
don't know why.
Did the Siereni Consortium.
I remember this. Yes. Yeah. Yes. I remember some of this.
Okay.
Man, I need to re-listen to that, our own episode.
You should just not don't tilt your head too much because apparently your fucking brain just leaks out of it.
We need to make a wiki. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or a word
so
analyst.
much work.
We're 25 episodes in, guys. 24 or 24.
I'll just write up a word
We're 24
analyst. It's fine.
episodes. Technically 25 if you count the recap episode.
We're running out of
but
time.
Still,
It's going to be more painful the longer we wait.
You're not even wrong. I hate it. If anyone listening wants to help us create a wiki, that would be great. Mm-hmm. You don't have to, but
that'd be nice.
It would mostly be for Chris's benefit, is what I'm guessing.
Hey.
You literally created one that was just like this. Yeah. Anyway.
That sounds like a great idea.
No, Daniel, I actually really like that idea. I think that's a really fun way to do it.
I mostly don't know what's going on, so that would actually help
me.
no,
this is like early. I think this is like episode 8 of the podcast. It was an early time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's
long
move
ago.
On. Yeah. I think that kind of solidifies the culture a little bit, right? Like, it's where, and I think what we're getting from just kind of like, we're talking about the specific points, but we're also creating, what we're also creating by what we're not talking about is the sense that the people in the Empire's day-to-day lives is often full of fear, not just of, the Emperor's paranoia, but also of, you're kind of creating a really paranoid sense within the population as well. Is that person who's been well, actually, I don't think we've actually talked about the fact that they know about the Divine Coalescence and they know about the spies, but maybe there's a rumor about how the Emperor has spies everywhere, and they don't necessarily know how that works yet, but there is a sense of paranoia where it's like, how does he know so much? Because it's an unwitting kind of power that it works over. They don't know that they're part of this. So it's like, I don't know that I'm a spy, but I've been resurrected. And so,
I mean, it speaks to reach, right? Like the Emperor is so large that you might even have towns where they're completely untouched by its direct like military influence or its influence of spies, but they've heard these rumors because they're so removed. And at the same time, like we know that there's a certain focus on kind of education and intelligence, like the development of their ideas, because they're learning new technologies to develop this like military engine,
Yeah, and again, going back to like a dichotomous relationship, you can kind of see how the regular people would be like, okay, yes, we are intelligent and we are militaristic, in which would essentially create a sense of community and togetherness, but the paranoia that all of this has kind of inspired has started to make people solitary and untrusting, and so that sense of community is starting to break apart as well. So I think it's kind of important to also think about, like, so obviously we're talking about the paranoia with these people, like what is and it's a large empire, right? Like what does the landscape look like?
So I was picturing big, beautiful white pines. Just like dark forest kind of style thing of where
Germany?
Yeah.
Okay.
What were you picturing?
I have a very different picture of, because
it's a big empire.
Well, I suppose so, yeah. But in my mind, like, again, we're thinking like Persia. We're thinking a lot more arid. Like, part of it is going to be desert. And in my mind, I'm thinking like giant mountain fortresses. Like, that's what I want.
You can have mountains.
Maybe there's a reason why there's such a disparate separation in environments.
Oh, that's actually really... Okay.
Oh, you mean like Russia-sized landmass of where, like, you got...
Right, like these tall trees, but then the other portions, for some other reason, are totally different and arid.
That's actually a really great idea.
Technology related.
Yeah, and I can't, and not only that, but you're also adding to the resources of the empire.
I'll have an explanation for that after.
He must be from the eastern part.
Well, no, I was thinking like, because I can't remember who said it, but or where I read it, but it's essentially the idea that empire building is easy when you go east and west, but way more difficult once you go north and south because of the climate change. So,
I got you covered.
All right. Well, why don't you step in?
Go ahead.
Daniel,
Go ahead with the trees first, though, because I want to hear that landscape.
You want to hear trees? Okay, go ahead. Hit us, Bob Ross.
Yeah.
This is a happy little tree, but I was picturing snow-covered forest, thick, dense trees, mountainous areas, kind of more like Switzerland, which get that. But also I wanted one large river. Like a river
like the Yangtze or something like that.
I was the Rhine.
Okay, yeah, the Rhine
Tiber.
The Rhine's not as big as you think it is.
As big as it is in my heart.
Okay. Well, when you say big, do you mean wide or long? Because that's
wide.
Important. Okay. Yeah, okay. All right. Or let's split the difference. Let's say the Mississippi. How about
Mississippi Queen. Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, cool. So we want a river with all sorts of because now we're kind of transitioning into the economy and resources. What kind of economic or resourceful value would a river like that, like a giant river, have?
Well, one, it would, once again, going back to the other places that we've had big rivers, it brings an easier means of transporting things. You can have finished goods go downriver. If you have any sort of means of, I don't know, we're not at steamboat age. We're only at the age of sail.
We're not. Yeah, I don't think.
But it's the fact that you can transport up, say, like finished goods, which would be lighter, and transport down heavy raw materials.
Well, that works perfectly.
Yeah, that works really well actually, because now we're combating that idea that you can't build north-south, and it would also contribute to the idea that you have a whole variance of resources as well. That's a really fun idea. But now we have to think about, how do they get it back up? Like, how do they get Because is it north to south and all of the resources come from the north and go down to the south to be produced? Or is it the opposite? And which way does the river flow? And, like, because in the United States, right, Civil War, it was the North won the Civil War because that's where all of the production, all of the technology, that's where finished goods came from. Whereas the South was all agrarian and had a bunch of abundant resources.
Well, I'm picturing the area that is snow-capped mountains and dense forest as being where you mine the resources.
Okay.
And maybe where they're produced is downstream.
Yeah, I kind of had the idea in my mind that this was more of a Persian, so closer to the equator or fantasy equator in this case makes a lot more sense. So that's a lot more fun. So it's, oh man, and you're literally like sending logs down the river to like a lumber mill or something like that. Yeah, that works really well. Okay. Now we got lumber mills. Now we got lumberjacks. Yes. Okay. I'm totally down with that. All right. Daniel, you said you had, now that the pines are out of the way, go ahead. Hit us.
So you established that there's this kind of wintry area that's piney. It's also where the raw materials are, and the resources are going down to where they're being manufactured elsewhere. But that place that they're being manufactured in is geographically different than the wintry area.
I wouldn't even necessarily call it wintry. I would even go so far as to call it like temperate.
Yeah. So they're different geographies.
Yes.
So I was thinking
The elevation helps with the snow.
Yeah, okay. It's like California in that way. Yeah.
I was thinking, what if the distinction between those two areas is like you can literally pass through a certain area and you can stand on one side and stand on the other and they look fundamentally different. And the reason would be that perhaps in the area where the resources are, there's this ore that's kind of throughout that area that is itself a god heart. Like it's basically a giant divine piece of material.
It's the god of the earth.
Daniel, you love breaking rules. But okay, I'm kind of into it.
Go with me here. Okay. So it's a god heart that's passive, and that there's not what the Empire does. They couldn't really destroy it or build their civilization on it, but they mine it. And by mining materials from it, they have these extremely strong forging tools. So their forges are built out of this metal that they can basically use to break and forge other things, like the other god hearts and relics that they broke in the past.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's insane.
Do they know that it's a god?
I think it would be a secret held by the emperor,
Oh, yeah. And not only that, but this is probably the reason that they have this forged and the ability to create relics in general, because what else can mold and shape god stuff but another god? Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh,
and so this god is there. It's just that they can't really destroy it, but they've been mining it over the centuries,
Or is it replicating, or is it just a matter of
I don't know.
Because I think what Chris said before, it's like it's literally it's like a god of earth,
right,
or god of stone, or that type.
And
of
they can't like colonize this area in the way they've done other areas because for whatever reason, like the very earth itself is this god.
One of the things that I really like, I forget the name of the setting or anything, but it was the setting that takes place in the city that is like all about a Tarrasque that they've hammered down, and they mine flesh out of, they mine bone out of it.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. It's a really cool idea.
I'm picturing like every now and then maybe there is like a tremor in the earth and everything, and it was just like, oh, it's weird.
I like that.
Okay, so are we? Oh man!
So it's a question of whether it's alive or not. They don't know.
Let's keep
we hit a nerve.
Yeah. Let's keep it a mystery. Mm-hmm. Maybe it is a god heart. Maybe that's just what they think it is, and maybe it's something else entirely that we don't have an answer.
Maybe
for.
the caves inside have strange runes that remind you of the Forgotten.
I was gonna say maybe the Forgotten are involved. Maybe it's a weird pseudo Forgotten that's like a giant, and it was a war machine.
No one really knows.
We're gonna keep it a mystery.
Yeah,
we're gonna keep it a big old question mark because I think it's more fun to keep it that way. But for whatever reason, this thing allows them to mold and create relics. Yes. Okay,
I like that.
Woo! Oh man. Do we have anything else with the economy and the resources? Because I feel like that does it just about well. My idea was kind of like, obviously they're going to have good metals and obviously they're going to have good woods, but you guys totally like snuck that out. So I mean, you just made my ideas better. So, or you had better ideas than me, I guess is what I'm trying to say, but I would never say that. So
Never openly.
yeah, exactly.
Wouldn't openly admit to that.
I'll cut it all out. Don't worry. I will somehow rearrange this to make it sound like I am the smart one.
I'm glad that we all went with my idea.
Yeah.
Getting cut. All right, so I think that's a good stopping point because we've touched on government and power, we've touched on culture, we've touched on the economy and resources of the Empire of Embers, and next episode is where we're going to go more into geography, more into points of interest, and we're going to talk about the capital a little bit more. Although I think this episode did such a great job of setting a really great base for the rest of it. Great job, gentlemen. I'm excited to kind of explore this all next week. And if you have any suggestions for us in the meantime, questions, suggestions, comments, go ahead and send us an email at worldbuildwithus@gmail.com. We'll be happy to send back and listen, and that's what we're all here for. And until next time, we love you very much, and have a great week, and stay out of the gaze of the Emperor.
Goodbye. Damn it, Chris. No.